Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into the Middle Ages, but forget everything those Renaissance fairs taught you. You're not a noble knight or a fair maiden in a tower. You're cold, you're hungry, and you smell like a barn animal that's been dead for 3 days. The romantic glow of torchlight? That's just your eyes adjusting to a world without electricity, where darkness isn't cozy, it's terrifying. And that feast you're imagining? Yeah, you're not invited. You're outside the castle walls, knee-deep in mud that's definitely not just mud, wondering if you'll make it through winter. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing this community spread across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've just arrived in a typical medieval village somewhere in Europe around the year 1250. The first thing that hits you isn't the sight, it's the smell. Imagine every unpleasant odor you've ever encountered, multiply it by 10, and then add the distinct notes of human waste, rotting food, and unwashed bodies. Welcome home. The streets aren't paved, they're packed dirt that turns into a soup of mud, animal droppings, and chamber pot contents every time it rains. People just throw things out their windows. Garbage, yes, but also the contents of their chamber pots. There's no sanitation system, no garbage collection, no "please dispose of waste responsibly" signs. Your house, and let's be generous calling it that, is a one-room structure made of wattle and daub. That's sticks woven together and covered with a mixture of mud, straw, and animal dung. Yes, dung. It's actually an excellent insulator, but that doesn't make it any less disturbing when you remember you're essentially living inside a dried manure shell. The roof is thatch, which sounds quaint until you realize it's a perfect home for rats, insects, and the occasional bird. When it rains heavily, your roof leaks. When it's dry, bits of it fall into your food. You share this space with your entire family, parents, siblings, maybe grandparents if they've beaten the odds, and possibly your livestock. Keeping a pig or chickens inside isn't weird, it's practical. They provide warmth and you can keep an eye on your investment. There's no privacy, obviously. The concept barely exists. You sleep on a straw mattress on the floor, and that straw gets changed maybe once or twice a year if you're fastidious. The rest of the time, it's accumulating all sorts of biological matter you'd rather not think about. Historians still argue whether medieval people actually said, "Sleep tight, don't let the bedbugs bite," but the bedbugs were definitely there, along with fleas, lice, and various other parasites that considered you an all-you-can-eat buffet. Let's talk about your bathing situation, or rather your lack thereof. That myth about medieval people never bathing? It's exaggerated, but not by much. Full-body baths were rare, maybe a few times a year for most people. The effort required to heat enough water was substantial when you're hauling every drop from a well or stream and heating it over your single fire. Plus, there was genuine medical concern that bathing too frequently would open your pores to disease. So instead, you do what's called dry cleaning. You change your undergarments, if you have spare ones, and maybe wipe down with a damp cloth occasionally. Your outer clothes? Those basically never get washed. You wear them until they fall apart and then you patch them and keep wearing them. The church is the grandest building you'll ever see, and it's not close. Gothic cathedrals took generations to build, and most villages had simple stone churches that were still impressive compared to everything else. On Sundays you're expected to attend Mass, conducted entirely in Latin, which you don't understand. You stand for the whole service, pews won't become common for centuries, and you're surrounded by that same smell, now concentrated indoors. But the church offers something valuable, a break from labor and a sense of community, even if that community judges you constantly for every perceived sin. Speaking of community, everyone knows everything about everyone. There's no anonymity in a village of maybe 300 people. If you sneeze wrong, it's gossip by noon. If you have an argument with your spouse, the whole village takes sides. Privacy isn't just physically impossible, it's socially non-existent. Your reputation is everything, and it can be destroyed by rumor alone. That woman who knows too much about herbs? That guy who keeps to himself? Probably in league with the devil. You learn quickly to conform, to attend church, to participate in community events, because being an outsider is genuinely dangerous. Your daily routine starts before dawn. You wake up when the rooster crows or when the church bells ring for morning prayers, whichever comes first. There's no coffee to ease you into consciousness, that won't reach Europe for centuries. Instead, you might have some leftover ale or weak beer because remember, the water isn't safe to drink. Then it's straight to work. If you're a peasant farmer, which statistically you almost certainly are, you're heading to the fields. If you're a craftsperson, you're opening your workshop. If you're a woman, you're managing the household, which is a full-time job involving cooking, cleaning, childcare, textile production, and about 17 other tasks that never end. The social hierarchy is rigid and divinely ordained, or so you're told constantly. God put the king at the top, the nobles below him, the clergy off to the side, and you at the bottom. This isn't just social structure, it's cosmic order. Questioning it isn't just rebellious, it's heresy. You owe labor and a portion of your harvest to your Lord. You can't leave the manor without permission. You can't marry without approval. Your children will do what you do in the same place forever. Social mobility is nearly impossible. That romantic notion of a peasant becoming a knight? Fantasy. It happened so rarely that when it did, people wrote it down as miraculous. Now let's address what you're eating, because your modern palate is about to stage a full rebellion. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is a chunk of dark, dense bread and maybe some ale. This bread isn't the fluffy sourdough you're imagining. It's made from whatever grains survived the harvest. Wheat if you're lucky, but more likely barley, rye, or oats. Often it's mixed with ground peas or beans to stretch the flour. The result is a heavy, coarse loaf that's frequently contaminated with ergot, a fungus that grows on rye and causes hallucinations, convulsions, and gangrene. Entire villages sometimes experienced mass poisoning, seeing visions and losing limbs to what they called St. Anthony's fire, never realizing their daily bread was literally driving them insane. Your bread is also your plate. Trenchers, thick slices of stale bread, serve as edible dishes for your meals. You pile your food on top, the bread soaks up the juices, and then you either eat it or give it to the dogs or poor people waiting outside. If you're thinking this sounds unsanitary, you're absolutely right. Everything is unsanitary. Your wooden bowl gets a quick wipe between uses. Your spoon, and you probably only have one utensil, a spoon, gets the same treatment. Forks won't become common for centuries, so you're eating with your hands for most meals, the same hands you've been working with all day. The ale you're drinking with every meal isn't optional, it's survival. Water sources are contaminated with everything you can imagine and several things you'd rather not. Rivers serve as drinking water, bathing spots, latrines, and industrial waste dumps simultaneously. That picturesque stream running through the village? Upstream, there's a tanner soaking hides in urine and animal brains. There's a butcher washing blood and offal into the current. There are people relieving themselves on the banks. Drinking that water raw is essentially playing Russian roulette with dysentery, cholera, and typhoid. So everyone drinks ale, weak ale, usually around 2 to 3% alcohol, but enough to kill most waterborne pathogens. Children drink it. Pregnant women drink it. Monks drink it by the gallon. It's not about getting drunk, it's about not dying of dehydration or disease. Your main meal comes in the afternoon and it's pottage, a thick stew that's been simmering over your fire all day. Into the pot goes whatever you have. Vegetables from your garden if it's growing season, dried peas or beans, maybe a bone with some meat scraps if you're fortunate, herbs and water or broth. This pot rarely gets fully emptied or cleaned. You just keep adding to it, day after day, creating what's called perpetual stew. Historians debate whether this was actually common or mostly myth, but the principle holds. You waste nothing and that pot is your most valuable cooking vessel. The pottage tastes different every day depending on what went in, and different doesn't always mean good. Sometimes it's burned on the bottom. Sometimes it's bland beyond belief. Sometimes it's actually decent and you remember that meal for weeks. Meat is a luxury you rarely experience. If you're a peasant, you might eat meat a few times a year, at festivals, after a pig slaughter in autumn, or if you're incredibly lucky. Hunting is forbidden. The forests and their animals belong to the nobility. Getting caught poaching a deer means losing a hand or worse. So you make do with chickens if you can keep them alive, eggs when the hens cooperate, and very occasionally a pig that you've been fattening all year. When that pig gets slaughtered, usually in November, it's a major event. Every single part gets used. Meat gets salted or smoked for preservation, blood becomes black pudding, intestines become sausage casings, fat becomes lard, even the bladder becomes a storage container. Nothing is wasted because you can't afford waste. Fish is more accessible if you live near water, but even that comes with restrictions. The Lord controls fishing rights and you're limited in what you can catch and when. Still, fish is your primary source of protein during Lent and the numerous other fast days mandated by the church, which, by the way, add up to nearly half the year. On fast days you can't eat meat, eggs, or dairy. Just fish, vegetables, and bread. The church is very specific about this and violations are serious sins. So you eat a lot of salted herring, dried cod, and whatever else you can preserve or afford. Dairy products are important when you can get them. Milk spoils quickly without refrigeration, so it's usually turned into cheese or butter immediately. The cheese is hard, salty, and designed to last months. It's not the artisanal aged cheddar you're imagining, it's sustenance, plain and simple. Butter is precious, used sparingly, and often rancid by modern standards. You learn not to be picky because pickiness is a luxury that will literally starve you. Vegetables from your garden, if you have one and if it's producing, include onions, leeks, cabbage, turnips, and peas. These are boiled into submission, usually in that perpetual pottage. Fresh fruit is a rare treat, and when you get it, you eat it immediately because it won't last. Apples, pears, and berries in season are highlights of your year. You might dry some for winter, but preservation techniques are limited. Sugar doesn't exist in your world except as an exotic spice for the wealthy. Your sweetener is honey if you can get it, which means either keeping bees or trading for it. Spices are worth more than gold by weight, and you'll never taste most of them. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, these come from distant lands through trade routes you can barely conceptualize. They're for nobles and rich merchants. Your flavor palette consists of salt, if you're lucky, herbs you grow or forage like parsley and sage, and whatever natural flavors your ingredients provide. Garlic and onions are your flavor workhorses, used in nearly everything because they're reliable and you can grow them. Now let's talk about your teeth because they're not going to last. That coarse bread you're eating? It's often contaminated with grit from the millstones that ground the flour. You're literally eating tiny rock particles with every bite, slowly grinding down your tooth enamel. Combined with a diet high in fermented foods and ale, plus zero dental care, your teeth are rotting. By your 30s you're losing them. By your 40s, if you make it that far, you might be gumming your food. There's no dentist to visit, no fillings, no root canals. If a tooth abscesses, you either suffer through the infection or find someone willing to yank it out with pliers. No anesthesia, just maybe some alcohol to dull the pain. Tooth infections kill people regularly because the infection spreads to the jaw, then the bloodstream, and then you're dead. Let's move on to your living conditions, because your home is going to shatter every romantic notion you've ever had about cozy medieval cottages. You live in a one-room structure, maybe 20 feet by 15 feet if you're doing well. The walls are wattle and daub, woven sticks plastered with a mixture of mud, clay, straw, and animal dung. Yes, dung. It's an excellent binder and insulator, but it also means your walls are literally made of manure. When it rains heavily, these walls can soften and crumble. When it's dry, they crack. You're constantly maintaining them, replastering sections, hoping the whole structure doesn't collapse during a storm. Your roof is thatch, bundles of straw, reeds, or heather laid in overlapping layers. It's surprisingly effective at keeping rain out when properly maintained, but it requires constant upkeep. Thatch rots, attracts vermin, and is incredibly flammable. One stray spark from your cooking fire and your entire home becomes an inferno in minutes. Village fires are common and devastating because houses are built close together and they're all equally combustible. When one house catches fire, the whole village can go up. There's no fire department, no organized response beyond neighbors frantically throwing water and trying to create fire breaks by tearing down adjacent buildings. Inside your home, the floor is packed earth, maybe covered with rushes or straw that you replace periodically. These floor coverings become repositories for everything that falls: food scraps, mud, animal waste, human waste if someone misses the chamber pot at night, spilled liquids, dead insects. The smell is phenomenal and not in a good way. You get used to it because you have no choice, but visitors from outside your household would be hit by an overwhelming stench of decay, smoke, unwashed bodies, and organic decomposition. Your furniture is minimal. A rough wooden table, a few stools or benches, maybe a chest for storing your few possessions. Your bed, if you have one, is a wooden frame with rope or leather straps supporting a mattress stuffed with straw, wool, or feathers if you're prosperous. More likely you sleep on a straw pallet directly on the floor. This bedding is alive with fleas, lice, bedbugs, and other parasites. You share your bed with your spouse and probably several children. Privacy doesn't exist. Intimacy happens with children sleeping 3 feet away. Everyone hears everything. The centerpiece of your home is the hearth, an open fire pit in the middle of the room or against one wall. This fire is your heating, your cooking, your light source, and your social center. It's also slowly killing you. There's no chimney, or at best a hole in the roof to let smoke escape. Most of the smoke just fills your home, stinging your eyes, coating everything in soot, and destroying your lungs. Respiratory diseases are rampant. Chronic coughing is so common it's barely remarked upon. Children grow up with smoke-damaged lungs. The elderly wheeze and struggle for breath. You're essentially living inside a smokehouse, and you're the meat being cured. Lighting after dark is a serious challenge. Candles are expensive, They're made from tallow or beeswax, both valuable commodities. You can't afford to burn them casually. More commonly you use rush lights, dried rushes soaked in animal fat, held in a simple clip. They provide a weak, flickering light, burn quickly, smell terrible and drip hot fat. Most activities happen during daylight hours because working by firelight or rush light is difficult and dangerous. When the sun sets, you're largely done for the day. You might sit by the fire talking, doing simple tasks, or just going to sleep because there's nothing else to do and you're exhausted anyway. Your home also houses your animals during winter. Chickens, a pig, maybe a goat or sheep, they come inside for warmth and protection. This means you're living with animal sounds, smells, and waste. The animals contribute body heat, which is genuinely helpful in winter, but they also contribute fleas, mites, and disease. Your living space is a barn that you happen to sleep in. The line between human and animal quarters is barely existent. Water must be carried from the village well or stream, a task that falls primarily to women and children. You need water for cooking, cleaning, drinking, though remember you're mostly drinking ale, and occasionally washing. Every drop must be hauled in buckets, which is back-breaking labor. This is why bathing is rare. It requires heating massive amounts of water over your fire, a process that takes hours and uses fuel you can't spare. You might bathe a few times a year, usually in summer when heating water is easier. The rest of the time, you wipe down with a damp cloth when you remember or when the smell becomes unbearable even by medieval standards. Your toilet is a bucket, a chamber pot that gets emptied into a cesspit behind your house or just thrown into the street. Public latrines exist in some towns, usually just holes over a pit or flowing water, but they're communal and disgusting. Toilet paper doesn't exist. You use leaves, moss, your hand and then rinse it, or a communal sponge on a stick if you're using public facilities. Yes, communal. Everyone uses the same sponge. Try not to think about it too hard. Garbage disposal is equally primitive. You throw waste into the street, into a midden heap, or into the nearest body of water. Streets are open sewers, filled with human and animal waste, rotting food, dead animals and industrial runoff. In cities the smell is overpowering. Wealthy people carry pomanders, perforated balls filled with herbs and spices, to mask the stench. You can't afford that, so you just breathe through your mouth and try not to step in anything too foul. Plague and disease spread easily in these conditions, and nobody understands why because germ theory won't be discovered for centuries. Your village or town has no street lights, no paved roads, no drainage systems. When it rains, streets become rivers of mud mixed with sewage. You wade through this wearing your only pair of shoes, which are probably wooden clogs or leather boots that are falling apart. Your feet are constantly wet, cold, and developing fungal infections. Trench foot is common. So are chilblains, painful inflammations caused by repeated exposure to cold and damp. Crime is a constant threat, especially after dark. There's no police force, no organized law enforcement beyond the local lord's guards who are more interested in protecting his property than yours. If someone robs you, assaults you, or breaks into your home, you're largely on your own. You might appeal to the Lord's court, but justice is slow, arbitrary, and often corrupt. Punishments are brutal, public whippings, time in the stocks, mutilation, hanging, but crime persists because desperation drives people to desperate acts. Now let's talk about what happens when you get sick or injured, because medieval medicine is going to horrify you in ways you can't imagine. You wake up one morning with a fever and a headache. In your time, you take some ibuprofen, drink fluids, maybe see a doctor if it persists. Here, you're entering a nightmare lottery where the treatment might be worse than the disease, and your chances of survival depend more on luck than anything resembling medical science. First, understand that medieval medicine is based on the theory of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Physicians believe illness results from an imbalance of these humors, and treatment involves restoring balance through bloodletting, purging, or inducing vomiting. None of this works because the entire theory is wrong, but it's all they have. Germ theory doesn't exist. Antibiotics don't exist. Antiseptics don't exist. Anesthesia barely exists. You're about to experience healthcare that would be considered torture in your time. But here's the thing, you probably can't afford a physician anyway. Trained doctors are rare and expensive, serving primarily the nobility and wealthy merchants. You'll be treated by the local wise woman, a barber surgeon, or an apothecary, none of whom have formal medical training. The wise woman knows herbal remedies passed down through generations, some of which actually work through active compounds we'd recognize today. Willow bark contains salicylic acid, the precursor to aspirin. Foxglove contains digitalis, used for heart conditions. Moldy bread sometimes contains primitive antibiotics. But she's also mixing these effective remedies with complete nonsense. Amulets, charms, prayers, and treatments based on superstition rather than observation. The barber surgeon is your option for anything requiring cutting, tooth extraction, setting bones, amputating limbs, removing bladder stones, or the ever-popular bloodletting. He's called a barber surgeon because he actually is a barber who performs surgery on the side. His shop is identified by the red and white striped pole, red for blood, white for bandages. He has no understanding of anatomy beyond what he's learned by doing. He's never seen a medical textbook. His tools are not sterilized because nobody knows sterilization is necessary. He's going to cut into you with the same blade he used on the previous patient, and he'll wipe it clean on his apron, which is stiff with dried blood from months of surgeries. Let's say you develop an infected wound, maybe from a farming accident. In your time, this is treated with antibiotics and heals in a week. Here, the infection spreads. Your wound becomes red, swollen, hot to the touch. Pus oozes from it. The infection enters your bloodstream, sepsis, though nobody here knows that word. You develop a high fever. You're delirious. The barber surgeon is called. He examines you and decides you have too much blood, which is causing the fever. He needs to drain the excess. He brings out his phlegm, a small blade designed for bloodletting, and opens a vein in your arm. Your blood flows into a bowl. He takes a pint, maybe more, believing this will restore balance. In reality, he's weakening you further, reducing your body's ability to fight the infection. You become pale, dizzy, weaker. The infection continues spreading. Your wound turns black, gangrene is setting in. The barber surgeon's next recommendation is amputation. It's your only chance, he says, and he's actually right about this. Remove the infected limb before the gangrene spreads to your vital organs. You're given something to drink. Maybe wine mixed with opium or henbane, medieval attempts at anesthesia. It dulls the pain but doesn't eliminate it. You're held down by strong men. The barber surgeon works quickly because speed is the only mercy he can offer. He cuts through your flesh with a large knife, saws through your bone, cauterizes the stump with a red-hot iron to stop the bleeding. You're conscious through most of this, screaming, begging for it to stop. The smell of your burning flesh fills the room. The entire procedure takes minutes because he can't afford to be slow. You die from shock or blood loss. If you survive the surgery, and many don't, you face weeks of recovery with a high risk of post-operative infection. Your stump is bandaged with cloth that's not clean by modern standards. You develop a fever again. Pus seeps through the bandages. You might survive, becoming one of the many disabled beggars you see in every town, or you might die slowly from infection, fever consuming you until your organs fail. Childbirth is particularly deadly. 1 in 3 women dies in childbirth or from complications shortly after. Babies die even more frequently. Half of all children don't reach age 5. When you go into labor, you're attended by a midwife and female relatives. Men are excluded from the birthing room. The midwife has experience but no formal training. She's never seen an anatomy diagram. She doesn't understand the mechanics of birth beyond what she's observed. If your labor is normal, you might be fine. But complications are common and usually fatal. Breech birth, placenta previa, eclampsia, postpartum hemorrhage, all death sentences. The midwife has limited interventions. She can try to turn the baby manually, an agonizing process. She can give you ergot-to-speed contractions which might help or might cause your uterus to rupture. If the baby is stuck and clearly dead, she might perform an embryotomy, cutting the baby into pieces inside you to remove it and save your life. You're awake for this. You feel everything. If you survive childbirth but develop childbed fever, a bacterial infection of the uterus, you'll die within days. Your fever spikes. You become delirious. Your abdomen swells and becomes tender. Nothing can be done. Antibiotics won't be discovered for centuries. You die in agony while your newborn is given to a wet nurse, if one can be found, or fed animal milk from a rag, which often leads to the baby dying too. Dental problems are excruciating and common. Sugar is rare, but your diet of coarse bread wears down your teeth and gets stuck in them, causing decay. By your 30s, you probably have multiple cavities, abscesses, and missing teeth. Toothache is a constant companion. The only treatment is extraction. The barber surgeon grabs the offending tooth with pliers and pulls. No anesthetic. You're held down while he yanks and twists. The tooth might break, leaving roots behind that continue to abscess. Your mouth fills with blood. You're given wine to rinse with and sent home to heal or not. Diseases we've forgotten ravage medieval populations. Leprosy rots flesh and extremities. Sufferers are forced to live in leper colonies, ringing bells to warn others of their approach. Ergotism, caused by fungus in rye bread, causes hallucinations, gangrene and convulsions. People call it St. Anthony's fire. Sweating sickness appears suddenly, kills within hours, and disappears as mysteriously as it came. And of course there's the Black Death, which will kill 1/3 to 1/2 of Europe's population in the mid-1300s, and nobody understands why or how to stop it. Let's address the elephant in the room, the thing that makes medieval life not just difficult but genuinely terrifying for someone from your time. It's not the hard work, the bad food, or even the primitive medicine. It's the violence. Medieval society is saturated with violence in ways that would traumatize you within days. You're entering a world where human life has less value than you can comprehend, where brutality is entertainment, where the line between law and barbarism doesn't exist, and where you have no rights, no protection, and no recourse when violence finds you. Start with the justice system, which is designed to terrify rather than rehabilitate. Crime is rampant because poverty is universal and law enforcement barely exists. There's no police force. The local lords' men-at-arms handle serious crimes, but most disputes are settled by the community or not at all. When someone is caught stealing, the punishment is immediate and public. For stealing bread you might lose a hand. The amputation happens in the town square. Everyone gathers to watch. You're forced to place your hand on a block. The executioner brings down his axe. Your hand falls to the ground. The stump is dipped in boiling tar to cauterize it. You're marked forever as a thief, disabled, and left to beg or starve. For more serious crimes, punishments escalate into elaborate torture. Murderers, rapists, and traitors face execution, but not quick execution. Death is meant to be slow, agonizing, and public. Hanging is the most common method, but not the quick drop that breaks the neck. You're hoisted up slowly, strangling over minutes while the crowd watches. Your face turns purple. You lose control of your bowels. You kick and thrash until you finally go still. Sometimes you're cut down while still alive, disemboweled, and your organs burn before your eyes before you're finally allowed to die. Drawing and quartering is reserved for the worst traitors. You're dragged through the streets tied to a horse. You're hanged until nearly dead, then cut down. Your genitals are cut off. Your abdomen is opened and your intestines pulled out while you watch. Your heart is cut out. Finally, your body is beheaded and cut into 4 pieces, which are displayed in different parts of the kingdom as a warning. This isn't ancient history, it's standard practice throughout the medieval period. People bring their children to watch. It's considered educational. Burning at the stake is the punishment for heresy and witchcraft. You're tied to a post surrounded by wood and kindling. The fire is lit. If you're lucky, you die quickly from smoke inhalation. If you're unlucky, the fire burns slowly, and you roast alive, screaming, your skin blistering and charring while the crowd watches and the priest prays for your soul. The smell of burning human flesh fills the air. People eat food while watching. Children play nearby. This is normal entertainment. But formal executions are just the visible tip of medieval violence. Daily life is punctuated by casual brutality that would horrify you. Domestic violence is not just common but expected. Husbands are legally entitled to beat their wives. The only restriction is that the stick used can't be thicker than a thumb, the origin of rule of thumb. Women have no legal recourse. If your husband beats you unconscious, breaks your bones, or causes permanent injury, that's his right. If you fight back and injure him, you'll be punished. If you kill him in self-defense, you'll be executed. Children are beaten regularly. Spare the rod, spoil the child isn't just a saying, it's educational philosophy. Teachers beat students for wrong answers, slow learning, or fidgeting. Parents beat children for disobedience, talking back, or no reason at all. Severe beatings that would constitute child abuse in your time are considered proper parenting here. Children die from beatings and it's rarely investigated. A child's life is worth less than an adult's, which is already worth very little. Animals suffer constantly. Horses are beaten until they collapse. Dogs are kicked and starved. Cats are tortured for entertainment, throwing them off buildings, setting them on fire, using them for target practice. Bear baiting and bull baiting are popular sports where dogs attack chained bears or bulls while spectators bet on the outcome. The animals are torn apart slowly. The dogs are gored and trampled. Everyone cheers. This is a fun afternoon. Warfare is constant and devastating. Medieval Europe is a patchwork of kingdoms, duchies, and territories in perpetual conflict. Armies march through regularly, and when they do, you suffer regardless of which side you're on. Soldiers need food, so they take yours. They need shelter, so they occupy your home. They need entertainment, so they rape the women and kill anyone who resists. Your lord's army does this. The enemy army does this. There's no difference to you. If you're conscripted, and you probably will be at some point, you're handed a spear or a bow and told to fight. You have no training. You have minimal armor, maybe a leather jerkin if you're lucky. You're placed in formation and marched toward the enemy. When battle begins, it's chaos. Men are screaming, dying, bleeding. Arrows fall like rain. Cavalry charges through, trampling infantry. You're terrified, trying to stay alive, stabbing at anyone who comes near. If your side loses, you run. If you're caught, you're killed or ransomed if you're valuable enough. If you're not valuable, your throat is cut and you're left in a field with thousands of other corpses. Sieges are worse. When an army besieges a castle or town, the surrounding area is stripped of everything edible. Crops are burned. Villages are destroyed. Civilians are killed or driven away to starve. If you're inside the besieged town, you're trapped. Food runs out. People eat rats, leather, eventually each other. Disease spreads. Bodies pile up. When the town finally falls, and it usually does, the army pours in. What follows is an orgy of violence. Soldiers loot everything. They rape every woman and girl they find. They kill indiscriminately. They burn buildings. This is accepted practice. The soldiers are owed their reward for the siege. Even in peacetime, violence is everywhere. Tavern arguments turn into knife fights. Drunken brawls end in deaths. Feuds between families last generations with periodic murders on both sides. Roads are dangerous because bandits operate openly. If you travel, you risk being robbed, beaten, killed, or sold into slavery. There's no one to call for help. There's no emergency services. If you're attacked, you fight or you die. The legal system offers no protection because it's based on social hierarchy, not justice. If a noble kills a peasant, nothing happens. The peasant's life has no value. If a peasant kills a noble, even in self-defense, the peasant is tortured and executed, and probably their family too. Trial by ordeal is still practiced in many places. You're forced to carry a red-hot iron, or plunge your hand into boiling water, or be thrown into a river. If you're innocent, God will protect you. If you're guilty, you'll be burned or drowned. Either way, you're maimed or dead. You have no rights as we understand them. No freedom of speech. Criticize the king or church and you're imprisoned or executed. No freedom of movement. You're tied to your lord's land and need permission to leave. No right to property. Everything you have belongs to your lord and can be taken at any time. No right to safety. Violence can be inflicted on you by anyone above you in the hierarchy without consequence. This is your life now. You work until your body breaks. You eat food that's barely adequate. You live in filth and cold. You watch your children die. You suffer from constant pain and illness. You're surrounded by violence and death. And you do all of this knowing that in your time, none of this was necessary. You had antibiotics, anesthesia, human rights, rule of law, social safety nets, and a society that valued human life. Here you have nothing. You're a medieval peasant, and you wouldn't survive long. You wake one morning to find your neighbor hasn't emerged from his hovel. Through the thin wattle walls, you hear coughing, wet, rattling coughs that seem to shake the very timbers. By midday, someone whispers the word everyone dreads: plague. The Black Death doesn't announce itself with trumpets or warnings. It creeps into your village on the back of a flea, riding a rat that scurried off a merchant's cart 3 weeks ago. Now it's here and there's nowhere to run. Within days, the symptoms appear on your own body. You notice it first as you're hauling water from the well, a tender lump beneath your arm no larger than a pea. You tell yourself it's nothing, just a swollen gland from working too hard. But by evening, that pea has become an egg. By the next morning, it's the size of a hen's egg, hard and hot to the touch, throbbing with each heartbeat. The pain radiates down your arm and across your chest. You've seen these buboes before on the bodies they carried out last summer. You know what comes next. The fever arrives like a furnace igniting inside your skull. Your skin burns while your bones freeze. You shiver violently beneath your thin blanket, teeth chattering so hard you fear they'll shatter. Sweat pours from your body, soaking through the straw beneath you, yet you can't get warm. Your wife tries to comfort you, pressing a damp cloth to your forehead, but you can see the terror in her eyes. She's calculating how long before the buboes appear on her own body, on your children. In medieval times, plague doesn't discriminate. It takes entire families, entire villages, entire regions. The village priest comes to administer last rites, but he stands in the doorway refusing to enter. He mutters Latin prayers from a safe distance, a cloth soaked in vinegar pressed over his nose and mouth. The church teaches that plague is God's punishment for sin, that prayer and penance might save you. But you've watched the most pious villagers die screaming, their bodies covered in black pustules, blood seeping from every orifice. Prayer doesn't stop the bacteria Yersinia pestis from multiplying in your lymph nodes. though you don't know that's what's killing you. You only know that your body is betraying you in the most horrific ways imaginable. By the third day you're delirious. The fever has cooked your brain until you can't distinguish reality from nightmare. You see demons dancing in the corners of your hovel, their faces shifting between human and animal. You hear voices calling your name from the grave. Your tongue has swollen black and thick in your mouth, making speech impossible. The buboes have burst, leaking foul-smelling pus that your wife tries desperately to clean, though she knows it's futile. The smell of death already clings to your skin. Your children have been taken to a neighbor's house, though you suspect that's merely delaying the inevitable. Plague spreads through medieval villages like fire through dry thatch. The fleas jump from body to body, the bacteria finding new hosts with ruthless efficiency. There's no understanding of germ theory, no antibiotics, no modern medicine that could save you with a simple course of treatment. There's only suffering and waiting, and the cart that comes each morning to collect the dead. On the fourth day you can no longer breathe properly. The infection has spread to your lungs, filling them with fluid. Each breath is a desperate, gurgling gasp. Your wife holds your hand, weeping as you drown in your own body. You want to tell her you love her, that you're sorry for bringing this plague into your home, but your blackened tongue won't form the words. All you can do is squeeze her hand weakly as the darkness closes in. They'll wrap your body in a sheet, if there's still linen to spare, and throw you into the communal plague pit at the edge of the village. There's no individual grave, no funeral mass, no time for proper mourning. The pit is already half full of your neighbors, their bodies stacked like cordwood, covered with a thin layer of lime and soil. Within a week your wife will join you there. Within 2 weeks, one of your children. The plague will burn through your village until half the population is gone, and the survivors will be left to wonder why God has forsaken them so completely. This is how you die in medieval times, not heroically in battle, not peacefully in old age, but writhing in agony as your body liquefies from the inside out. The Black Death killed between 75 and 200 million people across Europe and Asia in the 14th century, wiping out 30 to 60% of Europe's population. Your death is just one more statistic in the greatest catastrophe the medieval world ever knew, and there's nothing, absolutely nothing, you could have done to prevent it. You're in the field when you hear the bells. Not the regular church bells calling the faithful to prayer, but the frantic, discordant clanging that means only one thing: danger. You drop your hoe and run toward the village, your heart hammering against your ribs. Other peasants are running too, abandoning their work, their faces pale with terror. Someone shouts that soldiers are coming, but whose soldiers? Your lord's enemies? Mercenaries? It doesn't matter. For you, a medieval peasant, all soldiers are the enemy. By the time you reach your hovel, your wife has already gathered what little food you have. A half loaf of bread, some dried peas, a small wheel of cheese you've been saving. Your children cling to her skirts, crying, sensing the panic in the air. You grab your few possessions: a spare tunic, a wooden bowl, the small knife you use for eating. There's no time for anything else. The soldiers are less than an hour away, and if you're still here when they arrive, you won't survive the night. You flee with your family toward the forest, joining a stream of other villagers running for their lives. The old and infirm struggle to keep pace. Some collapse by the roadside, gasping, begging for help, but no one stops. In medieval warfare, peasants are considered legitimate targets, not because of any military value, but because destroying the peasant population destroys your enemy's economic base. Soldiers will burn your crops, slaughter your livestock, and kill you without hesitation. This isn't the chivalric warfare of noble knights dueling honorably on horseback. This is total war, and you're caught in the middle. From the forest's edge, you watch your village burn. The soldiers, you still don't know whose side they're on, torch every building systematically. Your hovel, where you've lived your entire life, where your children were born, goes up in flames within minutes. The thatched roof catches first, sending sparks spiraling into the sky, then the wooden walls collapse inward with a roar. The church burns too, despite being holy ground. The soldiers don't care about sanctuary or sacred spaces. They're here to destroy everything, and they're thorough. You see your neighbor, old Thomas, being dragged from his house. He's too crippled to run, so he hid instead. Bad choice. The soldiers beat him with clubs, laughing as he begs for mercy. Then they tie him to a post and set it alight. His screams echo through the valley for what feels like hours but is probably only minutes. Your children bury their faces in your chest and you press your hands over their ears, but you can't block out the sound. This is what happens to those who don't flee fast enough. This is medieval warfare. The soldiers spend 3 days in your village, or what's left of it. They slaughter every animal they can find, Your lord's pigs, the communal chickens, even the dogs. They dump the bodies in the well, poisoning your water supply. They trample the fields, destroying crops that would have fed the village through winter. When they finally leave, marching toward the next target, they take several young women with them. You'll never see those women again. Their fate is too horrible to contemplate. When you finally dare to return, your village is unrecognizable. Blackened timbers mark where homes once stood. Bodies lie in the street, already bloating in the sun, those too slow or too stubborn to flee. The smell of death and smoke hangs heavy in the air. Everything you owned, everything you worked for, is gone. Your lord's manor house still stands. They didn't burn that, interestingly, perhaps planning to use it themselves, but your hovel is just ashes and memories. Now comes the truly impossible part: rebuilding. You have no tools, they burn with your house. No seed for planting, the soldiers took or destroyed it all. No animals to plow the fields or provide food. Winter is coming and you have no shelter, no stored food, no way to survive the cold months ahead. Your lord offers no help. He's too busy raising another army to defend his lands or seeking revenge. The church offers prayers but no practical assistance. You're on your own. You and the other survivors begin constructing crude shelters from salvaged timber and branches. You dig in the ruins of your hovel, hoping to find something, anything, that survived the fire. You find your cooking pot, warped and blackened but still usable. You find a few charred beans. That's it. That's all that remains of your life's accumulation. Your children are hungry, crying constantly, and you have nothing to give them. Your wife looks at you with hollow eyes, waiting for you to solve this impossible situation, but you have no solutions. Some families give up entirely. They leave, becoming beggars on the roads, hoping to find charity in the next town. Many will die before they get there. Others turn to banditry, robbing travelers, becoming the very thing they feared. A few sell themselves into serfdom to lords in distant manors, trading freedom for survival. You consider this option seriously. At least as a serf, your children would eat regularly. At least they'd have shelter. The fact that you're contemplating slavery as an improvement over your current situation tells you everything about how completely war has destroyed your life. This is the reality of medieval warfare for peasants. You're not a soldier, not a participant in the conflict, but you're the primary victim. Armies live off the land, which means they live off your labor, your food, your body. Between 1337 and 1453, the 100 Years' War devastated France, with English and French armies repeatedly ravaging the countryside. Entire regions were depopulated. Villages disappeared from maps. Thousands of peasants died not in battle but from starvation, disease, and casual violence. And through it all, the nobles who started the wars remained safe in their castles, planning their next campaign, completely indifferent to your suffering. You're accused of stealing. You didn't do it, you've never stolen anything in your life, but your neighbor claims he saw you near his grain store the night someone broke in and took a sack of barley. That's all it takes in medieval times, an accusation. There's no investigation, no gathering of evidence, no presumption of innocence. Your neighbor's word against yours and he's more prosperous, more respected, more believed. You're going to trial, and you're already terrified because medieval justice has nothing to do with truth and everything to do with survival. The trial takes place in the manor court, presided over by your lord's bailiff, a man with no legal training, no understanding of jurisprudence, just the authority your lord has delegated to him. There's no lawyer to represent you. The concept of legal representation for peasants doesn't exist. You stand alone before the bailiff, your accuser, and a handful of village men who serve as a jury. They're your neighbors, men you've known your entire life, but you can see the doubt in their eyes. An accusation is almost as good as a conviction in their minds. Why would someone accuse you if you weren't guilty? You try to defend yourself, stammering out your innocence, explaining that you were home that night, that your wife can vouch for you. But your wife's testimony is worth less than a man's. Medieval law explicitly values women's words as inferior. The bailiff waves away your protests impatiently. He's heard it all before. Every accused thief claims innocence. He needs proof, he says. He needs God's judgment. Your stomach drops because you know what's coming next. Trial by ordeal. The ordeal comes in several varieties, all based on the medieval belief that God will protect the innocent and expose the guilty through supernatural intervention. The bailiff decides you'll undergo the ordeal of hot iron. A metal rod is heated in the fire until it glows red. You'll be required to carry it 9 paces. Afterward, your hand will be bandaged and examined 3 days later. If the burn is healing cleanly, you're innocent. If it's festering and infected, which it almost certainly will be given medieval hygiene, you're guilty. It's not justice, it's torture disguised as divine judgment. The day of the ordeal arrives. The entire village gathers to watch. Entertainment is scarce in medieval times, and a trial by ordeal is better than nothing. The priest blesses the iron rod, praying that God will reveal the truth. The bailiff's assistant pulls it from the fire, and you can feel the heat radiating from it even at a distance. Your hands are shaking. You're told to grasp the rod and walk 9 paces. If you refuse, you're automatically guilty. If you run, you'll be hunted down and hanged. There's no escape. You reach for the iron. The moment your skin makes contact, the pain is indescribable. Your flesh sizzles and sticks to the metal. The smell of burning meat fills your nostrils, your own meat. You want to drop it immediately, but the bailiff is counting paces. 1, 2, 3. Each step is agony. Your hand is cooking, the skin blackening and splitting. 4, 5, 6. You're screaming now, unable to help yourself. 7, 8, 9. Finally, you drop the rod and collapse to your knees, cradling your ruined hand against your chest. The priest wraps your hand in linen bandages, sealing them with wax so you can't tamper with the wound. For 3 days you endure the worst pain of your life. The burn throbs with each heartbeat. You can't sleep, can't eat, can barely think through the agony. Your wife tries to comfort you, but there's nothing she can do. You're not allowed to remove the bandages, not allowed to treat the wound. You just have to wait and pray that somehow, miraculously, your hand heals cleanly despite the severity of the burn and the complete lack of medical care. On the 3rd day, the bailiff and priest return to examine your hand. They unwrap the bandages slowly, ceremoniously, while the village watches. Your hand is a disaster. The burn has become infected, pus oozing from the blackened flesh, red streaks of sepsis climbing up your arm. The priest declares God's judgment, guilty. You're a thief. The fact that any severe burn would become infected under these conditions, that the ordeal is designed to produce guilty verdicts, doesn't matter. God has spoken through your festering wound. The punishment for theft is brutal. The bailiff sentences you to lose your right hand. There's no appeal, no second trial, no mercy. 2 men grab your arms and force you down onto a wooden block. The bailiff's assistant raises an axe. You're screaming, begging, swearing your innocence, but no one's listening. The axe falls. Your hand separates from your wrist in a spray of blood. The pain is beyond anything you experienced with the hot iron. You're going into shock, your vision tunneling, your body convulsing. They cauterize the stump with a red-hot poker to stop the bleeding, another layer of agony piled onto agony. Then they release you and you stagger away one-handed, your life effectively over. How will you work the fields now? How will you provide for your family? A one-handed peasant is nearly useless in medieval agriculture. You've been branded a thief, even though you're innocent, and mutilated for a crime you didn't commit. This is medieval justice, arbitrary, cruel, and inescapable. But wait, it gets worse. Some accusations lead to trial by combat, where you're expected to fight your accuser in physical battle, with God supposedly ensuring the innocent party wins. If you're a small, weak peasant accused by a large, strong neighbor, you're doomed regardless of truth. Other ordeals involve being thrown into water while bound. If you float, you're guilty because water rejects the sinful. If you sink and drown, you're innocent, but dead. There's also trial by consecrated bread. You eat a piece of blessed bread, and if you choke on it, you're guilty. Given the dry, hard bread of medieval times, choking is almost guaranteed. The medieval legal system isn't designed to determine truth or dispense justice. It's designed to maintain social order through fear and to reinforce the power of the nobility and church. Peasants have essentially no rights. Your lord can accuse you of anything and have you punished without trial. The church can. You wake up, if you can call it waking, in your hovel 3 days later. The fever has you in its grip, shaking your body like a dog with a rat. Your wife is there, her face gaunt with exhaustion and fear, pressing a damp rag to your forehead. Your right arm ends in a cauterized stump wrapped in filthy linen that's already soaked through with blood and something worse. The smell tells you everything you need to know about infection, about sepsis creeping through your veins. You've survived the amputation, but survival in medieval times is a relative term. You're alive but you're ruined. The physical pain is constant, a grinding throb that radiates from your wrist up through your shoulder and into your jaw. But it's nothing compared to what you're beginning to understand about your new reality. You're a one-handed man in a world that requires 2 hands for everything. Farming, your only skill, your only means of survival, is now nearly impossible. You can't grip a plow handle, can't swing a scythe, can't tie sheaves of wheat or milk a cow or repair a fence. Every task that once defined your existence has become exponentially harder or completely beyond your ability. Your wife tries to help, taking on work that should be yours, but she's already exhausted from her own endless labor. Medieval peasant women work as hard as men, spinning, weaving, cooking, cleaning, tending the garden, raising the children, helping in the fields during harvest. Adding your work to hers is breaking her. You can see it in the way her shoulders slump, the way she moves more slowly each day. Your children watch with wide, frightened eyes. They're old enough to understand that something fundamental has changed, that their father is no longer the man he was, that hunger is coming. But the physical limitations are only part of your new nightmare. The missing hand marks you as a criminal in a society obsessed with visible punishment. Medieval justice isn't just about retribution. It's about branding, about ensuring that everyone knows what you've done. Your stump is a permanent advertisement of your guilt, a sign that warns every person you meet. This man is a thief. It doesn't matter that you were innocent. It doesn't matter that the trial was a farce, that the ordeal was designed to convict you. The missing hand is proof of your crime, and in medieval times, proof is reality. The social consequences hit you almost immediately. Your neighbors, people you've known your entire life, avoid you now. When you hobble to the village well, conversations stop. Women gather their children and hurry away. Men turn their backs. You're contaminated, morally diseased, a criminal who can't be trusted. The few who do speak to you do so with barely concealed contempt. Some spit when you pass. Your accuser, the man whose lie cost you your hand, walks freely through the village, his reputation intact, even enhanced. He's the vigilant neighbor who exposed a thief. The economic reality of your situation becomes clearer with each passing day. You owe your lord the same labor services you always did, 3 days a week working his fields, plus extra days during planting and harvest. But you can't fulfill those obligations anymore. You try, dragging yourself to the Lord's fields, attempting to work with one hand, but you're pathetically slow, barely accomplishing a quarter of what you once did. The bailiff, the same man who sentenced you, watches with cold satisfaction. He fines you for inadequate labor. The fine is added to your already crushing debt. You're spiraling into a hole you'll never climb out of. Your wife takes in spinning to earn a few pennies, working by candlelight long after dark, her fingers bleeding from the constant work. It's not enough. It's never enough. You sell your second pig, the one you were saving to breed, for a fraction of its value because everyone knows you're desperate. The money disappears immediately into debt and food. Your small store of grain dwindles. You start skipping meals, telling your wife and children you're not hungry, watching them eat the thin pottage that's all you can afford. You're losing weight you don't have to lose, your body consuming itself. The psychological toll is worse than the physical. You're drowning in shame and rage and helplessness. The shame of being marked as a criminal, of being unable to provide for your family, of watching your wife work herself to death trying to compensate for your disability. The rage at the injustice of it all, the false accusation, the rigged trial, the barbaric punishment. The helplessness of knowing there's nothing you can do, no appeal to make, no authority to petition. You're trapped in a system that has crushed you and will continue crushing you until you're dead. You think about running away, about abandoning your family and trying to start over somewhere else. But where would you go? You're bound to this land by law and custom. If you leave, you're a fugitive, and fugitive serfs are hunted down and returned to their lords, usually with additional punishment. And even if you could escape, what then? A one-handed man with no skills, no references, no connections? You'd be begging on the streets of some town if you even made it that far. Medieval society has no place for people like you, broken, marked, useless. Winter is coming and you're not ready. Your hovel needs repairs you can't make. Your firewood supply is inadequate because you can't chop wood efficiently with one hand. Your food stores are dangerously low. Your children are already thin, already coughing. Your wife's hands are raw and infected from constant work. You lie awake at night, the stump throbbing, your stomach cramping with hunger, and calculate how long your family can survive. The math is brutal. You might make it to spring. Probably not. The village priest visits, ostensibly to offer spiritual comfort, but really to remind you that your suffering is God's will, that your punishment proves your guilt, that you should accept your fate with Christian humility. He suggests that your misfortune is an opportunity for spiritual growth, that physical suffering purifies the soul. You nod and thank him because you have to, because showing anger toward a priest would bring even more trouble. But after he leaves, you sit in the darkness and wonder what kind of God designs a world this cruel, this arbitrary, this merciless. You're 28 years old. In medieval terms, you're middle-aged, but you feel ancient, used up, finished. Your body is failing. The infection in your stump never fully heals, flaring up periodically with fever and pain. Your spirit is broken. Your future is a slow decline into deeper poverty, more hunger, more suffering, until eventually your body gives up and you die, probably of some infection or winter illness that a healthy man might survive. Your wife will be left alone with the children and the debt. They'll probably starve or end up as beggars. This is what medieval justice has done to you and everyone you love. This is what it means to be accused, convicted, and marked in a world where mercy is a luxury no one can afford and survival is the only law that matters.